They fined him $2,000 for not trimming shrubs that weren't even on his property. When John Parker, a retired firefighter, demanded answers, HOA President Karen Brooks smirked in his face. "Go ahead, fight it, but you'll lose. We always win." And she didn't stop there. Retaliation came swift and ruthless, bogus violations, threats of a lien on his home, and surveillance cameras watching his every move. The sun crept over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the neat rows of suburban homes. The air was crisp, carrying the fresh scent of dew-soaked grass and the distant chirping of birds. John Parker sat on his porch, his rough hands wrapped around a warm coffee mug. The gentle creak of the wooden rocker beneath him felt familiar, comforting, a small ritual he had enjoyed since retiring from the fire department. This house wasn't just a structure. It was his sanctuary, passed down from his parents, holding decades of memories. The tall, leafy hedges lining the edge of his property swayed lightly in the breeze, forming a natural barrier between his yard and the community park beyond. But that peaceful morning shattered the second he noticed a bright orange envelope taped to his mailbox. Bold, loud, and threatening. His brows furrowed as he tore it open, his pulse quickening with each word. It was a violation notice from the HOA. The charge? Failure to maintain community shrubs, and a crushing $2,000 fine. Wait, what? John's eyes narrowed, scanning the letter twice. Those shrubs weren't even his. They stood well beyond his property line, on land clearly designated as part of the community park. Outrage flared in his chest. How dare they fine me for something that isn't mine? Without hesitation, John grabbed the notice and marched straight to the HOA office, his boots hitting the pavement with a steady, determined rhythm. The sun was warmer now, but his blood was boiling hotter. Inside the air-conditioned office, the artificial chill did nothing to cool his temper. Behind the reception desk, perfectly framed in the glass office, sat Karen Brooks, the HOA president. Her sleek blonde bob and tailored blazer radiated authority, but her reputation? Pure tyranny. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Karen ruled the HOA with an iron fist, hiding greed behind fake smiles and community spirit speeches. John stepped forward, holding up the notice like evidence in a courtroom. His voice, low and controlled but brimming with restrained anger, sliced through the air. "Karen, this fine is nonsense. Those shrubs are on community property, not mine." Karen's lips curled into that condescending smile, the one that made your skin crawl. She folded her manicured hands on the desk and replied, dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, John, it's your responsibility. The shrubs line your property, so you're responsible for their upkeep. Pay the fine, or—" She paused, her eyes glinting with a subtle threat. "We'll escalate the matter." Can you believe that? No discussion, no fairness, just pure arrogance. John's stomach knotted, his fists clenched. Years of rushing into burning buildings taught him to stay calm under pressure. But this? This was a different kind of fire. His instincts screamed at him. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a setup. And Karen? She wasn't done with him. But you know what? Neither was John. And when it came to fighting for his rights, he never backed down. John's kitchen, once a place of comfort, was now a war room. The table overflowed with property maps, HOA bylaws, and highlighted documents, each piece of paper a weapon in his fight for justice. The smell of stale coffee lingered in the air, his untouched mug long gone cold. His eyes, sharp with determination, scanned the property map for the 100th time. And there it was, clear, undeniable proof. The boundary lines showed that the shrubs were on community property, not his. His chest tightened with hope. This will end it. Karen can't argue with facts. At the next HOA meeting, tension filled the room, thick and suffocating. Rows of folding chairs creaked under the weight of restless neighbors. The air buzzed with whispered complaints and wary glances. Everyone knew Karen ruled these meetings like a dictator. But John wasn't here for small talk. He stood, his voice firm and unwavering, holding the documents high. "I have proof. These shrubs belong to the community, not me. This fine is wrong and I won't pay it." Eyes turned to Karen. She lounged in her chair, a smirk curling her lips, the look of someone who believed she was untouchable. And then her voice, dripping with mockery, cut through the room. "Oh, John, maybe your eyes are as old as your fire gear." The room erupted with snickers from Karen's clique, loyal followers who always laughed on cue. John felt the heat rising in his chest, but he held his ground. Did you hear that? Insulting a man for standing up for himself? Unbelievable. But Karen wasn't done. No, she was just getting started. The very next morning, the retaliation hit, and it hit hard. First, another violation notice, this time for unauthorized lawn decorations, a fine for his garden gnome, a chipped little figure he had placed by his rose bushes since the 90s. It had stood longer than Karen's entire HOA reign. Second, a threat of a lien on his home. If he didn't pay both fines, the HOA would slap a lien on his property. His family home, his legacy, was suddenly a hostage in Karen's power game. And then, the worst blow. Surveillance cameras. Cold, black-eyed cameras installed by the HOA overnight, now pointed directly at his driveway. No notice, no consent. Watching his every move. His home, the place where he was supposed to feel safe, was now under a mechanical gaze. Cameras? What is this? A reality show or a neighborhood? John felt the walls closing in. It wasn't about shrubs. It wasn't about rules. It was personal. But you know what? Karen made one mistake. She thought John was alone. That's when he heard a sharp knock on his front door. He opened it to find a familiar face. Lisa Morgan, his neighbor. She wasn't just any neighbor. Lisa was a seasoned lawyer, and from the fire in her eyes, she was just as fed up with Karen's antics. "John," she said, her voice steady but urgent, "this isn't about shrubs. Karen's after something bigger. I'll help you, but we need proof." John felt the first flicker of hope in days. Lisa was tough as nails, and more importantly, she knew how to fight back. Together they started digging. They knocked on doors, spoke to neighbors, and uncovered something chilling. A pattern. Fines. Dozens of them. Neighbors fined for the color of their mailboxes, for bird feeders, even for parking in their own driveways. Most people paid out of fear. Some faced liens. And guess where all that money went? Into the HOA budget. A budget controlled entirely by Karen. Lisa's voice was cold and sharp as steel. "This isn't just abuse, it's fraud. Karen's running a racket, and if we can prove it, she's finished." John's hands curled into fists, not with anger, but with resolve. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was every neighbor's fight. And you know what? Karen picked the wrong guy to bully. Because John Parker, he knows one thing for sure. Some fires are meant to be fought. And he's ready to fight this one to the end. The night was heavy with silence, but John's heart pounded as he watched his security camera feed from his laptop. The screen flickered in grainy black and white, and there they were. HOA workers, flashlights in hand, shifting property markers under the cover of darkness. Unbelievable. Karen wasn't just bending the rules, she was breaking them. Can you imagine that? Caught red-handed, moving the markers to frame John for something he never did? With Lisa's help, John filed a legal request for the HOA's financial records. And what they found? Explosive, shocking, and downright disgusting. Karen was stealing. She funneled fines into a private account. Money meant for community repairs, blown on luxury vacations and a brand new SUV. Forged signatures on multiple violation notices. Victims? His neighbors. Lisa's eyes burned with fury. "John," she said, voice tight with anger, "this isn't negligence. It's a scam." So they went public. An emergency HOA meeting. The press invited, cameras rolling, the room buzzed with tension, neighbors packed wall to wall, faces tight with suspicion and anger. John, heart pounding, took the floor. The projector flickered to life. "This isn't just about Shrubs." His voice, clear and unwavering, filled the room. "It's about theft, deception, abuse of power. And here's the proof." On screen, surveillance footage, Karen's workers caught in the act. Then, bank records, lavish spending, private accounts, and finally, forged signatures, neighbor after neighbor. The room exploded in gasps. Whispers turned to outrage. Even Karen's closest allies looked shaken. And Karen? Her face twisted. Anger, panic. Then she snapped, voice cracking with desperation. "You've got nothing, Parker. This meeting is out of order." Really, Karen, out of order? Or are you just out of excuses? Suddenly, 2 uniformed officers stepped through the crowd. A hush fell over the room. "Karen Brooks," one officer announced, voice firm. "You're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement." Karen's face drained of color as cold steel cuffs snapped around her wrists. The crowd, applause, cheers, justice, served. And John? He stood tall, not just for himself, but for every neighbor Karen ever tried to silence. Because let's be clear, bullies like Karen think they can cheat the system forever. But sooner or later, the truth always wins. And today, the truth had a name. John Parker. The fall of Karen Brooks was swift, and oh, how satisfying. News of her crimes swept through the neighborhood like wildfire, and her once iron grip on the community crumbled into dust. The courthouse steps were a storm of flashing cameras and shouting reporters, their microphones catching every word as the charges were read aloud. Fraud, she stole from her neighbors. Forgery, she lied and faked signatures to extort money. Embezzlement, she spent their hard-earned fines on her own lavish life. Inside the courtroom, neighbors, victims, watched in silence, faces tight with years of frustration and fear. And there, in the front row, sat John Parker and Lisa Morgan, side by side. Their expressions? Calm, unshakable. This was what they fought for. The verdict? Guilty, on every count. Karen's face, once so smug and untouchable, twisted in disbelief as the judge declared, "All illegal fines, voided. Full restitution to every victim." The HOA board dissolved. That's right. Karen's kingdom was gone. But it didn't stop there. Oh no. The homeowners? They wanted real change. And who did they trust to rebuild it from the ground up? None other than Lisa Morgan. Sharp, fearless, and ready to lead. Under her watch, the HOA was reborn, not as a tool for power, but as a voice for the community. And John? His fight was over, and he won. The threat of a lien on his home? Erased. The bogus fines? Canceled. The HOA? Forced to issue him a formal apology. Did Karen sign it herself? No, but the paper still felt pretty damn good in his hands. But you know what meant even more? The infamous Shrubs. Yeah, those Shrubs, the ones that started this whole mess. John didn't touch them. He didn't have to. Instead, the entire neighborhood came together. Yes, together, to trim them properly this time. Can you imagine that moment? The laughter, the chatter, clippers snipping through the overgrowth, and through the tension that had choked their streets for years. Because this wasn't just about bushes, it was about taking back their home, together. And then, there was John, back where he belonged, on his porch. His old rocking chair creaked softly beneath him. His coffee, steaming and rich, felt warmer than ever, because today it tasted like peace. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with gold and amber, and the breeze carried the sweet hum of neighbors, his neighbors, laughing, chatting, living freely. A smile, soft and content, played at the corners of John's lips. Because this wasn't just his victory, it was theirs. A victory for every family ever bullied by greed. A victory for every neighbor too afraid to speak up. A victory that said, "You mess with one of us, you face all of us. And you know what? Let me tell you something. In a free country, no one has the right to violate your home, your peace, or your dignity." And John Parker? He showed us all. Even the mightiest HOA tyrant can't outrun the truth. And when good people stand together, justice always finds its way home.